you already made it. If you're here, you're paying attention, you have enough sats. Like
Yep.
in a long enough time horizon, you're gonna be good from a sat perspective. My name on Twitter right now is 37 sats. That is the block reward in, I think it's 94 years from now. 37 sats, the block reward at that point, 94 years, will be so much effing money, like that a very, very large portion of all of Earth's energy will be allocated towards trying to capture it. That's how bullish
Yeah.
you should be on Bitcoin. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
that bullish, then you are a bear.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Bitcoin is Hard, a Choice App production about Bitcoin and personal finance. Today, very excited to have CK with us, who's the managing director of Bitcoin Magazine and a content maker king himself, who's climbed through the ranks of Bitcoin content. What's up, dude?
Hey man, thank you so much for the gracious intro. And I love this topic that the podcast is kind of themed, and I love your mission, Brian, because I know this has been your personal mission is to bring Bitcoin and personal finance together, and it's something that is really something I'm super passionate about as well.
Mm-hmm. We've been poking around this. Like, if for the audience, if you want to search out there, we talked about this on Christian's POV Crypto Pod. We talked about this on the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. So if you search Brian and Christian personal finance, like, you'll find the previous episodes. But today, those had me talking a lot. And so today we want to hear Christian talk a lot. So these two words, like Bitcoin and personal finance, would just start at the top. What do you think of when you hear both of those words together?
Okay, so I guess I'm just going to zoom way out here. And to me, one of my favorite comparisons to a historical technological innovation that changed the world and that I like to compare Bitcoin to is the printing press. And there's a great article written by Anil. I think it's Anil Says So, or Anil. I'll send it over to you, Brian. It's on Bitcoin Magazine, but it's called Bitcoin and the Printing Press, and it makes a really articulate article or argument for why these technological innovations are so similar. I think that they're also like sociologically very similar too. Something that came along, so it kind of like the abbreviated version of the story is that the printing press was invented. It was almost like this open source technology that couldn't be stopped. It made it so that one, people could produce written information much, much more easily and disperse it. And it has brought down the cost of that compared to someone having to write it. But also, it set the groundwork for mass literacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So pre-printing press, no one was literate. Post-printing press, the majority of Europe, became literate over the course of decades and centuries. So the printing press brought on literacy, and I think that we live in a world right now similar to when religion and the church were, the state and the church were really kind of tied hip to hip, and there's a lot of like trusted third parties kind of separating access to God from the people. And the printing press was like this technology that effectively challenged that and eventually tore it apart. And the printing press, again, bringing on literacy, ultimately separated the state and church, and ultimately gave everyone in Europe and across the globe access to religious information directly. So it was absolutely huge. And something to know about, what literacy means in terms of your physiology, like the human brain of a literate person versus the human brain of an illiterate person is actually different, because the skills that are needed to read change and activate different parts of your brain throughout your life. And it creates different connections within your brain. So it actually changes human physiology. So I just made all this kind of big, grand information about, literacy and the printing press. Well, I think Bitcoin is that today. Like, we live in a world right now where there's these FOMC meetings and these Fed meetings and these central bankers who are like the trusted third parties of translating what's happening in the economy, in the world of finance, in the macro sphere. They hold the levers, they translate the levers, they set expectations. Markets trade against every word they say. and there is a complete connection of both state and money. The central banks are the manifestation of that. And everyone, guess what, is financially illiterate. Guess what? Everyone is financially illiterate. It's the exact same situation as literal literacy,
Yep.
but now in the realm of finance. And guess what Bitcoin is? Bitcoin is the printing press. Bitcoin has come here to democratize access to money, access to sound money, access to investing, access to savings. And now, because of Bitcoin, financial literacy is spreading like wildfire. Like most Bitcoiners that I know, I'm actually one of the weirdos. Same with you. We are already into personal finance before Bitcoin. But most Bitcoiners, it was like they were into trading, they were into science, they were into coding, whatever reason that brought them to Bitcoin. But Bitcoin actually brought on like Austrian economics, brought on saving, dollar cost averaging, long time preference, all these things that are kind of just part of like the foundation of personal finance and taking care of your money. Bitcoin is what introduced them to that. And I personally, again, I think that Bitcoin is what will bring like financial literacy to the world. Like it's going to be because of Bitcoin, just like the printing press brought literacy to the world.
How, dude, that's amazing. What that makes me immediately question then is, okay, the personal finance kind of call it influencer class and just the standard kind of what we'd consider personal finance advice that was championed as we were growing up. What then in the analogy, which I think is an excellent analogy, in saying that like everyone is financially illiterate because we haven't had this understanding of even what money is at the very base before. How would you categorize the advice up to this point now? Like, what is it? It's almost it made me think that it was almost just like all tinkering at the edges. Like it was tinkering at the edges, and you could like kind of make things a little bit better, but you were still on like the hamster wheel. It didn't matter what advice or what framework you followed, you're still on this thing that isn't working.
Well, I mean, if you just call up the local Fidelity office and get a financial advisor, like all wrong. Like again, it's built on this foundation of like, you know, cash is trash. The Fed are the god of the money that we live on, and these are the anecdotal ways to invest. That's passive, right? And some of it is like has some wisdom, but it's distorted because like the system itself is wrong. And none of these people are conscious about what they're doing. They're literally just checking boxes on like, here's the checklist of how to invest safely. And pretty much all they're doing is like, they're that next level of translation. They're working with, it's like the blind are leading the blind. And then those blind people are leading like the completely helpless. And the reality is that if we had cash that worked, like that's actually what most people want, then you wouldn't need this whole apparatus for people to simply save, pay themselves first. A book that was really important to me was is The Richest Man in Babylon. That was like one of the big cornerstones of my personal finance journey. And like the cornerstone of that book is like, if you make X amount of money and then you spend all that money, like you didn't pay yourself. You just literally were the pass through of that value. So you have to pay yourself first, and then you can pay other people. So I think that framing is really helpful. So again, and I think the reason why we have this whole apparatus is the money's broken. People can't easily just like in a way that's easy for them. They can't save, and then they need this apparatus of translation by blind money managers who are just following again like this just anecdotal best practices, yada yada.
Right. And then that makes me think of all the people that can't even get to the level of calling Fidelity or calling a financial advisor, or even calling, like, because they're only like living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. And they can't.
They're literally victims.
Mm-hmm. And so
they're
they
victims
can't save.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, you said victims of what?
They're victims of financial literacy and trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. We understand all of that at a high level. What do you think what's your current stack? Like, as much as you're willing to share, of just how do you budget? Like, what tools So we understand it at a theoretical level. What in Bitcoin then is the better money, solving financial literacy? What do you think? What are tips and tricks then that you think will continue to help Bitcoiners live in this time period? Like, how do you answer the most basic question of just how much fiat to hold and how much Bitcoin to hold?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's two really important things, and I honestly think that you are one of the best people who's putting out really practical information on how you should think about Bitcoin versus fiat, and how. And I think you say, like, you and your family, you try to increase. You have a two-sided balance sheet, a USD balance sheet, and a BTC balance sheet, and you're trying to make both go up. Like, you're still using USD as your unit of account. I would say I have a slightly different kind of mentality. I have like short-term savings versus long-term savings, kind of a methodology, where it's just like all long-term savings go into BTC, and then for me, like a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, I can never have enough BTC." For me, one of the core things that most Bitcoiners need to like trigger in their head is that you already have enough BTC. If your goal is to be wildly wealthy, you already have enough BTC. Your goal at this point should be how to not fuck it up. So you don't need to expose yourself to unnecessary leverage. You don't need to expose yourself to the risk of liquidation or the risk of like needing to sell. Like, if you're putting yourself in a position where you're investing money that you actually need to spend elsewhere, then you're actually like you're using quote unquote leverage. Like, that is leverage, and then you might be forced to sell at a time you don't want to sell. So while I think a lot of Bitcoiners are really focused in on like how do I hoard as much BTC as possible, like, believe me, I am buying Bitcoin hand over fist. This is an amazing buying opportunity. I'm not putting my financial well-being and my kind of choice on how to leverage my assets in a comfortable way at risk, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I already understand, like, I already have enough Bitcoin. Like, a good framework is one of my favorite books, The Sovereign Individual. They predict at the end of the day, there's going to be about 100 million sovereign individuals. So again, this is not science. This is, anecdotal. But, a sovereign individual is someone who has enough wealth to have control of their entire life. They don't
Mm-hmm.
answer to anyone, not even the state. That's how, wealthy a sovereign individual is, according to the book. So there's 100 million sovereign individuals. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. So
Mm-hmm.
like, you do the math, like, and honestly, I really do think that people should focus more on like, how do I live comfortably today? How do I protect my stack into the future? Versus
Mm-hmm.
like, how do I hoard as much Bitcoin as possible? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, like, you already made it. If you're here, you're paying attention. You have enough sats. Like,
Yep.
in a long enough time horizon, you're gonna be good from a sat perspective.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I love that. I love that a lot, and I love it because it's optimistic and it's also present. Like, I've said this on a few other places too. Like, Bitcoin is not something that's happening in the future. Bitcoin is happening right now. Bitcoin is happening right now, and Bitcoin is a part of you and your family's personal finances, like, right now. So it can't just be this like side thing that like you're shoveling and shoveling and shoveling to without this like over plan of kind of whoever's on your team understanding it. But then also, yeah, just that concept of like you have enough Bitcoin. I agree with that, and I've seen that tweeted a couple times. And I like that, and because it makes me think. Um, what was something else you just
my
said?
my name on Twitter. Sorry to interrupt you, but my name on
Yep.
Twitter right now is 37 Sats. That
Mm-hmm.
is the block reward in, I think it's 94 years from now. So honestly, 37 Sats the block reward at that point, 94 years, will be so much effing money, like
Mm-hmm.
that. A very, very large portion of all of Earth's energy will be allocated towards trying to capture it. That's how bullish
Yeah.
you should be on Bitcoin. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
that bullish, then you are a bear, and like, you probably are putting yourself at risk. Like, my goal is longevity with Bitcoin, like long-term
Mm-hmm.
savings. So, and I guess again, you're talking about what's my personal finance philosophy. It's like, I buy enough Bitcoin to not affect my lifestyle. And then instead of focusing on trading and bullshit, I focus on my life, my work, my passion. And, by focusing on those things, that increases my cash flow, which then I use to pay for my lifestyle and then allocate to more Bitcoin. It's as simple as
Mm-hmm.
that. Everything is a math equation. My life, I always pay myself first, so there's a minimum amount of Bitcoin I have to buy every single week, and then beyond that, if I have an excess, I'll buy more. And everything else, I'm just living the good life, man. I love everything. I provide for my family, I provide for my wife, and everyone's comfortable. No one is like, no one is sacrificing from a lifestyle perspective. And we have sats. We're good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's your um what's your perspective on how the like pay me in Bitcoin movement kind of like keeps growing and keeps trucking along? Like something I think is
Badass.
interesting is that like this word paycheck in Bitcoin, like Cash App keeps paying athletes to put these two words into the same sentence.
It's badass.
And
It's
Strike.
absolutely
Yeah.
badass.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like the way I see it is like it's awesome. It's the future. I think people are going to get paid from a like savings mentality first versus a spending mentality. And when you get paid in Bitcoin, then you have to decide how much you're going to turn into USD. It's a whole new kind of mental ball game. Personally, for me, I'm still doing the USD to Bitcoin thing, but I'm super disciplined. But I think in the short term, it's going to be dangerous, especially with the volatility and the taxing kind of situations. I think Matt Odell was talking on a previous podcast that he did with Marty Bent that getting paid in Bitcoin, the way it works is like, let's say you get paid $1,000. You technically, you have to pay taxes, income tax on that $1,000. But let's say 2 weeks later, it's worth $800. You still have to pay income tax on that,
Mm-hmm.
on that $1,000 you got paid. So like when that breaks into your actual earnings, it starts to be really painful. So what I think is like there's gonna be short-term FUD that comes out of it because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's a little ill-advised still. Like here, I am a hardcore Bitcoiner and I am still more comfortable getting paid in USD and then buying my fair share of SATs every single week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very comfortable doing that, and I just think that there's a lot less financially literate people who are making a lot of money who are jumping
Yep.
right into the pay me in Bitcoin thing, and the
Yep.
taxes are not friendly right now in the US. They really aren't to getting paid in Bitcoin. There's still fiat taxes. So, I guess long term bullish from a meme perspective, bullish from a Bitcoin marketing perspective, bullish. There might be a downside in the short to medium term with some people who are disgruntled with their tax bill.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. No, and this is what we want to cover here, and we want to cover both sides of that. And because I think what's interesting is that Bitcoin personal finance like advice and what the like perfect game theory of how to play is honestly it feels like it's changing in real time. And what's super interesting is we just did an episode with Britt. Like there's so many apps coming out all the time, and the features that are being pushed on all the apps are like getting like changing all the time, and it's honestly like kind of super hard to like keep up with. And
It's like the
so
credit
when
card game now. With the
yeah.
Sats back is starting to compete with the credit card point
Mm-hmm.
industry. It's gonna be honestly there should be like the Sats back guy who like
Mm-hmm.
really owns that vertical because it's gonna be huge.
Totally. Yeah. And I think what's going to be interesting is you're going to have this group of people that's kind of like pushing the envelope on the pay me in Bitcoin and kind of Bitcoin circular economy and these things. And then you kind of have the like chunk of people that come through of like, here's the main apps that you use and here's how you stack them together. And here's kind of what you do. I think what's exciting to me is that in 2022, we're already seeing people talking about getting paid in Bitcoin. And so that makes me think that like, the whole it's just kind of classic like gradually then suddenly like the whole thing's going to happen faster than we think it's going to if like there's already people kind of like tinkering around with it today. So how do you so in this split balance sheet world then do you are there any tips and tricks then on just kind of how you manage that like USD side that have been influenced by like how you think about Bitcoin?
Honestly, like I'm not like a good example. I'm my personal finance situation is not as relatable because I'm a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
Like I I'm so comfortable with like I buy this much Bitcoin and then I know how much money I make and then I make sure my credit card bill is less than that. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with that situation and I'm so like committed to buying Bitcoin that I can be a lot more like let's just call it laissez-faire. So
Yep.
like I don't think like I'm a great example because I think a lot more people need like a hard and fast discipline situation. So I mean, I would say for most people, like it all starts with you have to do the math. Like no one is just like no one starts with get on a Google spreadsheet, log your average credit card bill, log all your predictable monthly expenses, log your how much money you make, and then how big each of your asset buckets are.
Mm-hmm.
Just start by doing that. You've already improved your personal finance situation 100x. Straight up. Okay. Next step. If your income to expenses is in the negative, you got to fix that ASAP. That's where you have to like figure out what's wrong with your lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
in order to get that straight. If you have a massive amount of debt, you need to create a plan to eliminate that debt, and you need to quantify that over time. And there's a lot of tools, but you just have to like have a bigger picture.
Yep.
If you don't have debt, if your income is greater than your expenses, okay, next step is how much do you want to save and where? And again, there's a lot of tools. My favorite tool is Bitcoin. I think, again, Bitcoin is this revolutionary technology. It's going to completely change the world. And I'm stacking sats. Like, when I first started buying Bitcoin, I was buying other stuff. Now I only buy Bitcoin. So, for me, it was a personal journey. But like, that's personal finance. It's like how much you make, get it, tighten the rope enough to, you can pay yourself, and then
Yep.
pay yourself in a way that you're comfortable with and that And for me, like, I know Bitcoin super effing well. I have a cousin. He's wasn't as comfortable with Bitcoin 3 years ago, even though I was super comfortable with Bitcoin. But I was like, dude, stable coins, high yield savings account. That has orange pilled him. Now he's really comfortable with Bitcoin. So like, again, there's a lot of personal finance tools that are out there. If you just kind of look around, I think the crypto ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem, is a lot more productive than the fiat ecosystem. So if you're playing around in the Bitcoin ecosystem, you're going to find yourself making more value over time. So it's a good place to be. But I guess, that's my high level. I guess what are your thoughts on that? Again, I feel like I'm super just like laissez-faire with my strategy, whereas I'm sure there's other people who are like, I count every sat, I count every penny, I do it this way.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it. I think I like it, and that makes sense. And I think that is relatable. It's just good to hear that take. Inside that, what is your perspective on real estate? Like, what's your perspective on like buying versus renting?
So I have emotionally flip-flopped on real estate so many times in the past 6 months. It is, and I've been like, I have to admit, I was a hardcore big like real estate bear, and I've been wrong. I've been wrong. Like, it's impossible to be as bullish as I am on Bitcoin and to think real estate is a good like long-term investment. But with that being said, like, there's something so essential to land, and there's that dynamic of we live in a world right now where Bitcoin is not every man's store of value. If anything, every man's store of value is real estate. So that's going to be lucrative because it's just like this kind of common consciousness. Ask any millennial, what do you want? House. Mm-hmm. It's like a meme. Like, mm-hmm. So, like, I don't know, I'm so effing conflicted, and I'm about to move to Nashville, and here's like, everyone's like, oh, are you going to buy? And I'm just like, oh, I don't want to buy. But like, if I rent at this amount next year, I could get hit with like a 30% increase if I don't buy. Cause if I buy now, I just lock in my payments, for whatever. So it's just like, I don't know. It's complicated. What I would say here's the real estate mistake. Real estate is romanticized. Same cousin that I got onto the stablecoin interest rate stuff and who's now into Bitcoin, like the other half of that argument is like getting him into like crypto was getting him out of the idea of I'm going to put all of my value, I'm going to go all in on whatever real estate I can get my hands on. That is the critical mistake right now, is to FOMO into real estate and go all in. Because like, here's the weird thing about real estate is that people think it's a good idea to go all in on real estate. Like, that is like, again, talk about.
It's the most consistent way to become a millionaire. Most consistent way to become a millionaire.
But talk about financial illiteracy is to go all in on anything. Like, that's like, okay, going all in on Bitcoin, I think, is different because Bitcoin is money.
Because it is the money.
Bitcoin, and again, for me, like Bitcoin is going to hyper monetize. Real estate is not hyper monetizing. It's like out of context is completely a different situation. But like the anecdotal advice, since the 80s was like, save enough money to buy a house with all of that money, and then work a job to make sure that you make those payments. Like it's actually like the financial advice for the financially illiterate is prescribed debt slavery. Like that's what it is. And like you have to break out of that. So if I'm buying a house, it's on my terms. And it's not with all my assets. It's for sure not with all my Bitcoin. And beautifully, Bitcoin is hyper monetizing. Now there's solutions for me to leverage my Bitcoin, like what all the rich people do, and use that to buy the house. So again, like it's about context here. Again, like the financially illiterate advice is to go all in a house. That's a huge mistake. But like buying a house for short-term pleasure versus going all in on Bitcoin and renting for maximum optionality, it's hard. It's hard as a Bitcoiner for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dude, I love the takes. I love the takes, and I love the candidness, man. Thank you for being so candid about your strategy and just thoughts on that. All right, so the final question we ask every guest, and I might start asking that real estate question for the next little bit of the series because I loved your answer on it. But the one question we try to ask every guest is, what is a Bitcoin product or service that doesn't exist yet that you want and would use?
I mean, I really, really love the KYC minimized Bitcoin vouchers, and they're just not accessible enough still. So I think Bitcoin is the killer product. It's about getting Bitcoin to me on my terms, and I feel I found a sweet spot with the Bitcoin vouchers, but they're just not accessible. They're really not. Like it's so way easier to buy Bitcoin elsewhere, and I just want Bitcoin vouchers everywhere. I want everyone to be able to buy a Bitcoin voucher, redeem that voucher on a phone that they control, and Bitcoin for everyone with cash for the unbanked for the bank. I just want people to buy Bitcoin with vouchers. So that's something I really wish to see, kind of spread even more. I know that you're a big Bitcoin voucher fan, Brian. You educate a lot of people on different ways to get Bitcoin, but yeah, I would really like to see the Bitcoin voucher industry take a real nice big step forward.
Yep. Love it, man. That's a great answer. So, all right, dude, where can people follow you and say anything about just how they can interact more with the Bitcoin magazine?
Yeah, you guys, I pour my lifeblood into Bitcoin Magazine every single day. Wake up early, go to bed late, get weird looks from my wife for working too much. So Bitcoin Magazine, we have an enormous amount of ways for the community to interact with us. We're always hosting Twitter Spaces. We accept an enormous amount of contributions from the Bitcoin space. So send anything over to editor@bitcoinmagazine.com, whether it's news, whether it's stats, whether it's reports, whether it's your opinion on something written out that you want published as a contribution. That's the best place to send stuff, and it will be pushed over to the right place. And yeah, I mean, go to Bitcoin 2022. So I'm going to be working my butt off at that conference, but we are going to have 40,000 people for a 4-day Bitcoin festival. I've seen Brian multiple times at Bitcoin events. That's how we became friends. So I could not recommend Bitcoin events enough. And the biggest, the baddest, the most full industry encompassing is Bitcoin 2022. So April 6th through the 9th, b.tc/conference where you can get tickets.
Perfect. And say your Twitter.
Oh, yeah. And my Twitter is @CK_snarks.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Look, I co-signed that message on if you've got something to say, send it to Bitcoin Magazine because I've published with them. It looks good when it's online, and it's good for just you as a Bitcoiner to pour back in and get your thoughts out on the internet. So definitely co-sign that. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter @BrainHarrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.